I started making friends that are still my friends to this very day, lifelong friends. As I get older, I appreciate my teachers more and more. But to tell you the truth, I appreciated them then. Teacher salary is, not necessarily what it should be. And when I think about that, juxtaposed to the dedication that the teachers, the time they would spend to me, the way they would notice, are you okay? Is everything all right? You look sad today. Any little thing, like a family member would. And they fostered an environment of almost absolute trust, like your parents. There's 2 lectures that I got at school that changed the way I do comedy, that turned the light switch on. It was 2 teachers, Donald Lease. Donald Lease, may he rest in peace. Maybe one of the single best educators that I've ever met in my life. He had a demeanor about himself that demanded excellence from his students. He would tell us incredible stories that I didn't believe. He claimed in one class, the song Killing Them Softly was about him. I was like, nah, nigga, not you. He told me he knew Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack and all these people, these DC legends. He's a humble man, but he really demanded excellence. And he gave us a lecture once on a concept called polarization. Polarization meaning the idea that if you can make everybody look at the same thing at the same time, that their rational mind will decrease and the emotional response will increase. He said that's how audiences work, that's how mobs work, that's how you make a person lose themselves in the crowd. I got it. As he was saying this, he would hold a staple in his hand. It was a good lecture. He said, everyone focus on the staple, and then he would explain to us what polarization is as we're all looking at the staple, and then he'd scream, ha! And everyone would jump, oh! And he said, what you scared of? Oh, shit, that works. And ever since he did that lecture, I listened in his class intently. He was one of the only guys that I would always get straight A's from because I worked very hard, not to get his approval, but to avoid his disapproval. When we were coming up, they had a thing called juries. I don't know, do they still do juries? Juries is when all the department heads give you a piece to work on and they sit there and they make you perform the piece, and the criticism is brutal. We were kids. We didn't understand that they were preparing us for a hard world ahead. If you wanted a profession in art, they would tear us to shreds. The stress of a jury, and man, I never practiced. Because I act. At an improv class, a teacher named Geraldine Gilstrap told me that I should stop doing funny pieces, that I should try to stretch myself artistically, that maybe I had more in me than comedy. And at the time, I took offense to that. So because she said that, after school that very night, I went to the comedy club. For the first time, I signed the list, and I waited, and I got on, and I killed it. Killed it. Must have been 35 years ago, night after night, I killed it. I'd show up with a bag of tricks that I learned at school, and I would dominate adults on a regular basis. Couldn't wait to get out of DC. When I was 17, I moved to New York and lit that comedy scene up. I was obviously talented. You'll hear stories about people saying that I discovered Dave Chappelle. That's like saying you discovered sunshine. I was shining on everybody. And when I got in that professional world, I was oddly prepared. I had a sense of professionalism. I showed up on time. I did the things that I learned in school to do, just the basics. My career didn't have any direction because I was still so young. And that didn't change for many years. It didn't change until my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, told me she was pregnant. And I was like, you know what? I should really start taking this seriously. When she told me that, before the baby was born, I had done my first HBO special, and then I went to work on a sketch comedy show idea I had, and Chappelle show came out. When my son was still maybe 18 months, he was years old. And I bet on myself. I took less money. I remember that, so I could do what I wanted to do. I said, you don't have to pay me that much, but you can't ever tell me that I can't do what I want to do. I did the first season, I'll tell you, for $300,000. Which sounds like a lot of money, but. It was a rare experience in my life because it was the first time that I did something that was so successful that I knew I had exceeded their expectations. I was more successful than I felt like I was supposed to be. They didn't plan on that. The second season came out and was a juggernaut, and then I remember this was the single best day of my career. The Rick James episode of Chappelle Show had come out. People were going crazy about the Rick James episode. At the same time, the DVD for season 1 of Chappelle Show dropped. It was the first time any television show had ever been sold off air, and it sold 1 million copies in the first day. It was unheard of. To this day, nothing has sold more than Chappelle Show. It's still on the top 10 in Netflix. All those great things happened, and my contract was up, clearly. I'll spare you all the details of why it didn't work out. But it didn't work out. And I ended up doing something that no one had ever seen before, including myself. Maybe Prince is the only other guy that I've seen do this, where he just quit something that was popular when you're at the very top of it. Lucky for me, when I quit, I went to Africa, so there was a media storm that I didn't hear. By the time I got back, everyone was just looking at me crazy. That was a very difficult decision to make. The entire world told me I was crazy, but I was sure I was being true to myself and to something that I learned at Ellington. I'm one of those comedians that thought of himself as an artist. I was enamored by what the genre could do. It was like the pictures that I could paint with words and the way I could engage with audiences. I understood as it was happening. I was very lucky to be able to do this. And I protected that. And I knew that if I took the money, they would expect me to behave differently. And I wasn't willing to accept that. So I quit. And when I quit, it was a very difficult time in my life that I'll spare you the details, but man, fuck show business. It was tough. And then one day I was in Panama City, Panama, and I was at a hotel, and I looked at the lobby. There was a painting of Abraham Lincoln. And then I would look closer. It wasn't a painting. It was all pennies, just pennies, on a black canvas arranged into the face of Abraham Lincoln. And I asked the guy, I said, how much is that painting worth? He said, $600,000, sir. And I looked at the pennies that made up the painting, and I was like, that's like $300 worth of pennies. A light bulb went in my head. I realized the value of art. Some of the biggest wars and crimes and scandals in history were financed through the theft of art. Art is a powerful commodity. And artists, if you're good at it, should never behave as a commodity. That's a tough one. And then I gave up.
Everybody stop what you're doing right now. I mean it. Whatever you got going on, close the laptop, put down the sandwich, pause the other video, tell whoever is in the next room that you need a few minutes because something has just appeared on my screen and I will not move past it without talking about it. Without really, truly, deeply talking about it. Because this title, this seemingly simple, seemingly short, seemingly straightforward title, is doing something to me that I was not prepared for today. Something that I don't think I can shake. Something that I think by the time we're done here is going to mean a lot more than it appeared to mean at first glance. And the title is Dave Chappelle on This Changed My Life. Okay, I need you to read that again, slowly, one word at a time. Dave Chappelle on This Changed My Life. On the surface, and I want to acknowledge the surface before we go beneath it, because the surface is actually interesting too. On the surface, this is a pretty standard video title format. The such and such changed my life format is not new. It's not revolutionary. You had seen that construction 1,000 times on 1,000 different videos from 1,000 different creators. And usually when you see it, you scroll past it without blinking because you know the formula. You know what you're getting. Someone is going to tell you about the book that changed their life, or the trip that changed their life, or the workout routine that changed their life, or the morning habit that changed their life. And it's fine. It's content. It serves a purpose. But then, you put Dave Chappelle at the front of that sentence. And suddenly, everything changes. Suddenly that formula, that familiar, comfortable, seen it 1,000 times formula, is not familiar anymore. It is not comfortable. It is not something you can scroll past without blinking. Because the name Dave Chappelle does something to every sentence it appears in. It transforms it. It elevates it. It takes whatever was ordinary about those words and makes them extraordinary simply by association. Simply by proximity to a man whose entire existence has been about the extraordinary, about the true, about the real, about the things that actually matter underneath all the noise. But here is where this title gets really interesting. Here is where I need to slow all the way down and pay very close attention. Because there is a word in this title, a tiny 3-letter word, that is doing more work than any other word in the entire sentence. And that word is this. Dave Chappelle on This Changed My Life. Not Dave Chappelle on What Changed My Life. Not Dave Chappelle on the thing that changed his life. Not Dave Chappelle's life-changing lesson. No, Dave Chappelle on This Changed My Life. This. Do you hear that? Do you feel what that word is doing? Because this is a pointing word. This is a word that assumes you are close enough to the thing being referenced to see it. This is a word that pulls you in, that makes you lean forward, that says, come here, get close, look right here at this specific thing, because this is the thing we're talking about. Not a thing, not something, this thing, the thing I'm holding up for you right now. And by not telling us what this is, by leaving this undefined, by letting it float in the title without an antecedent, without a referent, without an explanation, whoever titled this video has created one of the most effective pieces of intellectual suspense I have encountered in a long time. Because now my brain, and your brain, and everybody's brain who reads this title, is immediately, involuntarily, completely consumed by one question. What is this? What is the this that Dave Chappelle is talking about? What is the this that changed someone's life? What is this thing, this specific, particular, unnamed, undescribed, mysterious this that is apparently so powerful, so transformative, so genuinely life-altering that a person felt compelled to make a video about it and title it in a way that makes the this feel almost sacred, almost too significant to name outright? Almost too big for a specific noun to contain? And I don't know. I genuinely, truly do not know. And that not knowing is electric. That not knowing is the most compelling feeling a title can create in a reader or a viewer. That not knowing is the literary equivalent of someone grabbing you by the collar and pulling you forward and saying, "Just come with me. Just trust me. Just follow me into this, because where we're going is worth it. I promise you it's worth it." And coming from Dave Chappelle, I believe that promise with my entire soul. But before we talk about what this might be, and we are absolutely going to do that, we are going to spend serious time speculating about what Dave Chappelle said that was so impactful that it changed someone's life, and they had to make a video about it. Before we get there, we need to do what we always need to do when Dave Chappelle's name is on anything. We need to talk about the man himself, because here is what I think people sometimes forget, or maybe never fully understood in the first place, about Dave Chappelle. Here is the thing that gets lost in all the conversations about the controversies, and the specials, and the fame, and the walking away, and all the external drama that has surrounded his career at various points. The thing that gets lost is this: Dave Chappelle is a philosopher. I know he's a comedian. I know that is his primary title, his professional identity, the thing he has been doing since before he could vote. I know that. But underneath the comedy, and sometimes the comedy is the vehicle, and sometimes the comedy is the philosophy. Because for Chappelle, those two things have never been fully separate. Underneath all of it, this man is a genuine, serious, deeply committed philosopher, a thinker, a person who has spent his entire adult life wrestling with the big questions. What is real? What matters? What is the relationship between truth and power? What does it cost a person to be honest in a world that rewards dishonesty? What do we owe each other? What do we owe ourselves? What is the price of integrity, and is it always worth paying? And how do you know when you're paying it for the right reasons, and not just being stubborn? These are not small questions. These are the questions that have occupied the greatest minds in human history. These are the questions that philosophers have been writing about for thousands of years. And Dave Chappelle, in clubs and arenas and TV studios and random parking lots and anywhere else he happens to find himself, with a microphone or without one, has been engaging with these questions with a seriousness and a rigor and a humanity that rivals anyone. That rivals the academics and the intellectuals and the public thinkers who get credited with this kind of work. The difference is that Dave Chappelle does it funny. He does it in a way that makes you laugh. And that laughter, and this is something I feel very strongly about, that laughter is not a distraction from the philosophy. It is the philosophy. The laughter is the point. The laughter is the proof that the thing he's saying is true. Because real, deep, bone-level laughter, the kind that comes from recognition, the kind that says, "Oh my God, that is so true. How is that so true? Why is that so true?" That kind of laughter is a form of understanding. It is the body's way of saying, yes, yes, I know this. I have felt this. This is real. And Dave Chappelle generates that kind of laughter more consistently, more reliably, more profoundly than almost anyone alive. So when Dave Chappelle says something, not on stage, not in a prepared bit, but in a real conversation, in an interview, in one of those moments where he is just talking, just thinking out loud, just letting his mind go where it goes, when Dave Chappelle speaks in those moments, it carries a very particular weight, because you know it is coming from a mind that has done the work, that has thought about it. That has not arrived at this position casually or carelessly, but has wrestled with it and tested it and lived it, and come out on the other side with something that has been earned. And someone, some person, somewhere, in some context, heard Dave Chappelle say something in exactly that kind of moment, and it changed their life. And that is what this video is about. And I need to know what it was. Now let me start really thinking about this, let me start seriously engaging with the question of what Dave Chappelle might have said that was so powerful it changed someone's life. Because I think this is worth doing. I think speculating about this before we watch, while we're still in the anticipation phase, is actually a valuable exercise. Because it forces us to think about what we know about Dave Chappelle, about what he believes, about what he has said over the years that has been most impactful, about the themes that run through his work and his public statements and his whole artistic identity. And when I think about that, and I think about the things Dave Chappelle has said over the years that have genuinely stayed with me, that have gotten under my skin in the best way, that have made me look at my own life differently, a few themes keep coming up, and I want to talk about each of them. Because any one of them could be the this. Any one of them could be the thing that changed someone's life. The first theme, and this is maybe the most central theme in everything Dave Chappelle has ever said publicly, is the theme of knowing your worth. Of understanding what you have, what it is actually worth, and refusing to let anyone, no matter how much power they have, no matter how much money they're offering, no matter how much social pressure they're applying, refusing to let anyone make you undervalue it. And this theme, in Dave Chappelle's life, is not abstract. It is not theoretical. It is written in a very specific, very concrete, very dramatic story that everyone knows, or thinks they know. The $50 million story. The Chappelle's Show story. The moment where the most commercially successful comedian of his generation looked at the biggest check he had ever been offered and said, "This is not enough." Not because the number wasn't big enough, but because the price being asked was not the money. The price being asked was something else. Something that didn't have a number. Something that you cannot put on a check, or deposit in an account, or spend on anything tangible. And Dave Chappelle, who understood what that something was worth, who had a very clear and very uncompromising sense of its value, said no. And that understanding, that ability to look at something that the whole world is telling you is priceless, and say, actually, compared to this other thing, it is not worth what they're asking. That is the kind of understanding that changes lives. That is the kind of clarity that most people spend years, sometimes lifetimes, trying to arrive at. The clarity about what you are willing to trade and what you are not. About where the line is, about what your line is. Not society's line, not your family's line, not the industry's line, yours. The line that, if crossed, means you are no longer yourself. Means you have traded the one thing that cannot be replaced. And if Dave Chappelle talked about that, if he articulated that clarity in a way that was specific enough, and honest enough, and human enough, I completely understand how that could change someone's life. Because most of us have never heard anyone say that so clearly. Most of us have been told our whole lives that everything has a price, that everything is negotiable, that enough money, or enough opportunity, or enough social reward can compensate for any compromise. And here is Dave Chappelle saying, actually, no, some things don't have a price. Some things you should not sell. And the most important skill you can develop, the most life-changing skill, is the ability to know what those things are for you, specifically, personally, without apology. The second theme I keep coming back to is the theme of truth. And I know that sounds broad. I know truth is one of those words that gets thrown around so much it can start to lose its meaning. But I don't mean truth in the abstract. I mean the very specific, very personal, very costly kind of truth that Dave Chappelle has committed to throughout his entire career. The kind of truth that gets you in trouble. The kind that makes people uncomfortable. The kind that is easier not to say. The kind that if you said it, might cost you something real. An audience, a relationship, an opportunity, a reputation. Dave Chappelle has always told that kind of truth, even when it was costly. Even when the safer, easier, more commercially viable choice was to keep certain thoughts to himself. Even when the criticism came, and the criticism has come, loudly, repeatedly from many directions. He did not retreat into safer territory. He stood in his truth, not defiantly, not combatively, but with a kind of calm, grounded, deeply held conviction that this is what he sees and this is what is real, and he is not going to pretend otherwise. And the lesson embedded in that, the life-changing potential lesson embedded in watching someone do that, in hearing someone articulate why they do that, is enormous. Because most of us are not telling our truths. Most of us are editing ourselves constantly. Most of us are performing acceptable versions of our thoughts, rather than our actual thoughts. And the cost of that, the long, slow, accumulating cost of that self-censorship and that self-management, is a kind of disconnection from ourselves that is genuinely damaging. That eats away at something essential, that makes us feel over time like strangers to ourselves.